morning and I worked on it for an hour. You're gonna give it 7 in the morning when? On Saturday. I woke up at 6:30. I was like, I'm gonna get this finished. Let me look at it. I forgot to print it out. I've only read through it once. What? I haven't even read through it. I wasn't even paying attention. I was trying to answer. No, I fell asleep.
It's on the side. It's basically a money range. So it's basically taking
I didn't know the answer.
Oh, wait a minute. Hello and welcome. Hello and welcome. Hello and welcome. And welcome. Good day, how are you? Fabulous. Thank you for asking. Hello and welcome. Welcome. Hello and welcome. Good day to you, and how are you? Excellent.
You can do it over if you want.
5 minutes. Hello and welcome.
No, like, honestly, because it's like the John Green doing for honors for APUSH. So I mean, he's like, I do too. And they made me angry. Like, why are you so handsome? Like, why do you like yourself? I love
Who's been that? I don't like regional. I like no one's up there.
I like
I love
all the jokes.
He's horrible. I'm so glad everybody else knows exactly what's going on better than me. No, I love it.
Yeah, and we went by. I love Mr. I love him.
You feeling better?
I know, like really.
Oh, find your period over there on that metal rack just to the right of Dalton Crossing. So if you go into your own Dalton process, okay, that metal rack, and your period there.
Reading is really interesting. I don't hate it.
All right, so for your warm-up pleasure, what you should be working on is, I've handed out the rubric to what they call the long essay. You got to know the new lexicon, the new words that the College Board is using. And so the written portion of the exam is divided up into 3 parts. It's going to have a short answer, which we haven't really dealt with yet, so don't worry, breathe. A DBQ, which we're going to talk about again. That one we're probably going to do in our next unit. And what they call the long essay. Okay, so it's one long essay. What they're going to do is give you 2 essays, and you are going to write on one of them. Now, if you look at the rubric, 2 of the things we've kind of dealt with already. The fact that you have a thesis and supports in the next the next part of of the rubric is going to be your analysis. And what the College Board is going to look for is one of 4 analysis techniques to be found in your essay. if that makes sense. The four they want you to include some way or utilized is time periodization or continuity and change over time or comparison, antithesis and contrast, and or cause and effect. So what I'd like you to do to warm up is define those. You can use fragmented language if you want, phraseology. What do you think what do you think they mean by this? And then I'd like to have a discussion about it. Okay? It's the same word name. We traded Jason's. We lost Jason Kim and gained Jason with Roger. Currently, there had to be a Jason present. So, but thank you. That was a good catch. It was.
Tap with the needle. Tap with the top of the needle. And if it makes depending on
All right, turn to your White House and just kind of check over, see if they have the same understanding of the of these terms that you do.
Right.
How's your weekend? You know, except for the struggles of the hosting brand and campus.
But you're in a nice air conditioned room when you're here.
Westchester used to be cool. Yeah. But all of a sudden Westchester is
Or if it wasn't this was supposed to be cool.
yeah, that's not working out so much either. But then they built new buildings to not catch the breeze. Did you notice that? Okay, faces where are your windows? And then you put cages over the windows so you can't even open them.
Oh yeah.
Do we have a pep rally? That's a lie. No, I don't like pep rally.
I don't know. It's not lying. Like
On Thursday. No, on the Wednesday. So the fire drill is actually there, so yet another to check and see if it indeed is Justin, is there a pep rally Friday?
Next Friday.
Next Friday?
I don't think so.
Wait. Yeah. What?
It's actually not that bad. I think it's at the very back.
Tuesday. The fire drill All right.
Fire drill, you kind of have to what? You're not stuck in it.
All right. So we got a lot to do. Got a lot to do. So everybody take a look at the rubric. So this rubric represents a shift from how they used to do it in APUS history. It used to be a 9-point scale. The interesting thing about the old 9-point scale is that how to get 8s and 9s. It just was it was almost ambiguous. It was, you know, they looked for such things as maturity in writing and stuff like that. That's really hard to quantify and measure, and what ends up happening is that almost nobody got it. The 8 and 9 essay was extraordinarily rare. So, with this new rubric, they've tried to make it far more you do it or you don't. Okay? You do it, you get the point. If you don't, you don't. And so what we did at the training that I went to in San Diego, we looked at a whole bunch of essays that were getting 7s and using the new scale. And they were getting 6s. Now, that may sound like that's worse, but did you notice what's the scale? 6. So they were getting full credit. What they basically were removing is some of the nuancey part of the writing. It was far more about, did you simply do the task? Did you master the task? You got the point. So that begs the question. Okay, so now where are they going to nail you? If, obviously because my belief is it's going to be in the short answers where they're going to mess with us. But I think it's going to lead to higher scores on the essays. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So is it just 6 points and can't get above?
Can't get above. And then the DBQ is 7. So it's just basically doing all that with documents. Does that make sense? Okay. Anyway, so it starts off with the things that hopefully you kind of know already. You get 1 point for a thesis. Now here's the tricky thing. You demonstrate a thesis, you get this point. So some people will go, well, therefore I don't need to have a well-organized essay thesis thing anymore. And I would still argue no. You need to have a bar, you need to have a good essay, because in order to get some of this analysis points and support points later, is your essay has to be organized in such a way to get to the higher level. Does that make sense? So I am still requiring that you bar it, okay? That you show what your thesis is, your background, your roadmap. Everyone knows where you're going. Does that make sense? Second thing is support. There are 2 points for support, and basically what we're looking for is you do at least 2 supports. Well, that they are on task, that they are based on your thesis, and you do them well. You get those 2 points. Does that make sense? So some might say, well, then I shouldn't put a 3rd. Well, here's the thing. You don't know if you've done it well or not. You don't know if your fact is right or not. So is it better to have the 3rd thing in there, some other support in there? Probably. Does that make sense? So it's 1 point for your thesis, 1 point for but you did something as far as support. 2 points if you do supports well. Got it? The 3rd thing is some analysis. Now in your analysis, you're going to have to show use of one of these 4 techniques. What is time periodization? Who can tell me what that means? If you're using this technique, what are you doing? So you're using kind of dates as you're sorting, collecting, showing and using commentary as to why these things are all belonging together. Okay, that could be using time periodization. Okay, continuity and change over time. What does that mean? Yes.
It's like using like a subject they give you and just saying like what parts of it kind of stay the same as time progresses and what parts of it change.
Okay, and now there's one thing that I want to make sure you do, because this is where I see students not get this. You need to make how things are, and then show what things stay the same and what things changed. So you want to make sure that you clearly demonstrate how things have changed or stayed the same. You comment on it. You add verbiage saying see, and make connections. You do it to a basic, I just sort of did it level, you get 1 point. You do it to a superior level, you get 2. Does that make sense? So now you've already got, very likely most of you, 5 points on this 6-point scale. What's that final 6 point? Oh wait, I forgot I've only done 2 of them. Okay, strike that, I said that. Comparison, what's comparison? Okay, what's comparison? Yeah, so this is kind of a basic thing. Comparing and contrast, you're venting it, right? Okay. And then finally, cause and effect. What's cause and effect? Yeah.
It's an essay technique that tells you that short sleeve because of this and that.
Right. And again, when you do this, use commentary, show, using words that express that you understand that this has happened. Don't just plot words on the page, provide commentary of that this is a cause, this is effect. Use words like that to make sure that the reader knows that that's the technique you're using. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so in your essay you have your thesis, supports, using one of these analysis techniques at least, and then finally, synthesis. What does it mean to use synthesis? What are they going after there? Okay, it could be bringing it all together. That would be the minimum. There's one other thing that I would say needs to happen in synthesis beyond just simply bringing it all together. Yeah. It could be bringing up those topic sentences, but there's something that really demonstrates the synthesis that you need to do to truly get that point. Yes. That would be again the minimum. That'd be the minimum. There's some last something that you should do to truly get the synthesis point. Yeah.
Can you kind of form like theory or ideas from all your written?
Sort of. You're almost there. Almost there. Yeah.
You could like apply like when you bring the stuff beyond.
So what? Why is this important? So what? So you need to, if you make that final so what, that's your synthesis. The best place to put synthesis is where? Conclusion. So know what they've done is they've made conclusion school again. Okay, conclusions under some of the old scales were less important. It was the way that the College Board, when they were talking about maturity in writing and stuff like that, they were assuming that people knew that they wanted conclusions, but they never stated it right out. Now they are pretty much by saying, you need to show synthesis. They're basically begging for a conclusion. So, so when you are done, that's so what? Why is this important? Okay, and basically doing what you said, bringing it together, and then why is it important? That is synthesis. That is what you need to do, and that will get you a 6. I believe that from what I've seen, we haven't this class. One of the reasons why I'm moving things out a little is at a 1-inning class essay, but it seems like y'all are pretty good at a basic thesis. It seems like you're pretty good at getting the right facts in as far as support. Okay. I think that if you know you need to bring it together, you will bring it together. You will get this point. And so I anticipate really good essay grades out of all of you. Does that make sense? So that's where one of the places we're shooting for. To make sure our content is good, so that we'll always have good supports. Our writing, we're going to follow these rules, and therefore we should nail this essay. Does that make sense? All right. Any questions on that? Yeah.
So on the AP,
One long essay, 1 DBQ, short answer, which we haven't dealt with that skill yet. So I'm holding that one back because it's so cool. And then the multiple choice, using those stimulus are basically the 4 components. Yeah.
What were you saying, like agree, modify, or like disagree? Is that the short answer?
So basically with the short answer, what they're going to do is give you a stimulus and then basically do kind of 3 parts where you just basically answer straight out the answers. Okay, so you'll see when we get there. Okay. All right. Any questions on this? So the essay for this unit, this rubric will apply. Note that we're shooting for the Friday because Tuesday they're doing a fire drill, which would have made doing an essay in class really hard. We were having trouble. I was having trouble getting all of Unit Chapter 8 done anyway, so it turns out to be good. Yeah, we have Thursday off. So we have Thursday off, then we have school Friday. So we go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off, then we have school Friday. Okay. Okay.
So we're gonna have Eastern next week, like the 30
Pardon me? On Tuesday?
Well, next week we're only gonna have you on Tuesday. It's gonna be like short as Friday.
Tuesday and Friday.
Oh yeah.
Got it?
Yeah.
So it's 4 days. You get me for half of them. Okay. All right. Are we good? Okay. So, all right. Everybody, switch into content mode, and I want everyone to kind of go back to last week. And I want you to remember how the Federalists were in power. And under the Articles of Confederation, the United States really didn't have much access to this part of the country because the British were in the north and the Spanish were blocking our access to the Mississippi River. But after George Washington, access to the West becomes more possible because of the Jay Treaty and the Pinckney Treaty. Therefore, the United States starts to look west. And so it is truly going to be the people that start Jefferson forward that basically get to take advantage of the West. And that's why we sometimes talk about them creating what we call a Republican empire. Because not only are they going to have that West to add to the country, but because of some of the deals that one of these guys makes, the United States gets even bigger. Okay, so does that make sense so far? Now, to talk about this movement west, however, we have to deal with a subject of it wasn't empty. So in some ways you go, woohoo! The West is open. And later, woohoo! We get more West. But when you think about it that way, you forget that that land was full of people. And so what I want to deal with first, before we really just get to people moving in, is the policies that the United States had regarding the people that were already there. Okay, does that make sense so far? So let's talk about American/American Indian policy. It starts at the very beginning, in the Treaty of Paris of 1783. Now, I'm not sure you guys remember, but remember when Britain gains all of that territory from France, they got this huge chunk of territory which was, well, full of people. And the British made a decision that they needed to have a better relationship with American Indians. And one of the things they did was they made the Proclamation of 1763 that said that people couldn't move west of the Appalachian Mountains. How'd that work out for them? Not so well. People started moving west anyway. During the American Revolution, the British, in effect, allied with many of the American Indian nations that lived in this section. The Mohawks, okay, for one. And these people kind of thought that fighting on the side of the British was better because the British had been attempting to keep the Americans out with things like the Proclamation of 1763. But when the British signed their treaty with the United States, they kind of sell out their American Indian allies. They basically put nothing in the Treaty of Paris of 1783 that basically protects American Indian land. The treaty says this is the land of the United States, everything on east of the Mississippi, north of Florida, south of the Great Lakes, all America. It doesn't put anything for American Indians. It basically just says, you're not our problem anymore. Got it? What that does is it allows the Americans to move in, and by force, particularly in places like upstate New York, particularly dealing with people who had been allies of the British during the war, the Americans would force these nations to simply give up their lands. And they would then move them to land that they reserved for these nations, called reservations. So United States America putting American Indians on what we now call reservations. It's a policy that goes all the way back to the beginning. Got it? As the Americans did this, however, there's going to be pushback. There's going to be some wars. And in these American Indian Wars, there was a particular battle called the Battle of Fallen Timbers, where the United States, under a general by the name of Mad Anthony Wayne, is in Fort Wayne, Indian Territory, Indiana. Mad Anthony Wayne wins, and he forces the American Indians that he defeated in the Ohio, Indiana area to sign a treaty. The treaty was known as the Treaty of Greenville. The Treaty of Greenville is kind of the precedent treaty to all American Indian treaties to follow. It is the precedent treaty for all American Indian treaties to follow. Just in case you did not get that, it is the precedent treaty of all American Indian treaties to follow. What it did is it recognized the land that that American Indians would be left on as being separate nations within the United States. So conceptually, think about it. If you ever saw like a map of South Africa, and you notice that within South Africa there's like little autonomous regions, right? Has anyone looked at a map and noticed that? Okay. Maybe somebody. Okay. Well, that's kind of what all American Indian lands are within the United States. They are semi-autonomous regions within the United States. Therefore, based on the precedent set by this treaty, any time the United States wants more land, they're going to have to sign a formal agreement with American Indians, where they would actually, in effect, have to cede their land to the United States. Got it? So, if there were like one source, and you had the only one source that you had for how the United States gained more territory, and let's say this was called the Great American Book of Treaties, you could flip page after page after page after page, and you would see American Indians giving up land and the United States gaining land. And if you only use this as your source, you would go, wow, this was such a legal thing. Look at that. There's a treaty every time. Look, another one. Ah, look. Oh, my goodness. Everyone complains. There's a treaty for every single one of these land acquisitions. Okay, it's all in paper. And the reason it's all in paper is because of the precedent set here, that you have to have a treaty. However, what this doesn't tell us is how to get the treaty. And what whites will use to get these treaties, trickery, coercion, in order to get American Indians to sign treaties to get their land. And the trickery, it's one of the techniques that the United States would oftentimes use is they would go to the Leona Nation. And they say, oh, great, powerful Leona Nation, we recognize that you control all of this territory, all of it. That you, the great powerful people that you are, rule all of this land. So, since you rule all of this land, if we give you stuff, will you sign a treaty that says now all of this land belongs to the United States? Stuff, right? Well, the thing is, all you people think you actually own your little separate thing of land, and what Leona just did is sold you out. You got the stuff, you didn't really care because it wasn't your land anyway, and you're happy. Okay? But, did we have the treaty? Yeah, we did. We have the treaty. Does that make sense in that sort of way? People start to get angry about the fact that this is what the Americans are doing. And they say, we gotta stop, we can't do this anymore. And so they came up with an alternative. What should we do instead? Assimilate. Okay, all y'all, you're now gonna be we're gonna make you just Americans just like us. Well, how well do you think that went over? What would we rather do? If you had your druthers, what would be your relationship with the United States? What would your preference be? Just leave us? But what the United States in effect did is they gave two choices. You could either become part of us via assimilation, or we'll destroy you. Kind of like if you've ever seen any of the Star Trek movies. There was a race known as the Borg that would turn people into cyborgs. And you could either assimilate and become a cyborg like them, or they would destroy you. The Borg theory of American history, the United States basically gave American Indians a choice: assimilate or be destroyed. G. Wash put it best. Okay. He looked westward, and he said that nothing short of a Chinese wall, obviously what was he referring to, would restrain the encroachment of settlers from the west. Think back. The British had said, we're going to have a line, you can't cross the line. And what do people do? They cross the line. Now we say you got to have a treaty. And what are people still doing? They're still doing it. They're still taking the land. So this was, in a weird way, what is George Washington telling us here? That it is what? Inevitable. Any questions on that? Does this make sense? Does this make sense? So vast numbers of people start moving west. In the South, they move to places like Tennessee, Kentucky, and Alabama. The key to this movement west was what they farmed, what these people grew. And it seemed just at about the same time that this westward movement began, we have a technological change. There was this guy by the name of Eli Whitney, and he's not the only person to come up with this idea, but he does patent it. Eli Whitney comes up with this thing called the cotton gin. Now, taking cotton fibers and turning them into cloth had been a thing. People have been doing it for centuries. But the problem was, it was laborious. In order to make a cotton cloth, you had to pick the cotton, which was labor, and then you had to hand remove the seeds before you could spin it into any sort of cloth. It was too expensive, so a lot of people didn't do it. Cotton gin, however, it extracted the seeds very quickly. which made it so that the only labor you really needed was to pick the cotton. This made it cheaper, particularly if you have a cheap labor source, as they did in the South. So, with the cotton gin making it so that cotton is profitable, when people move westward, what becomes the big crop in the Southwest? Cotton. So, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Alabama, cotton is the key. They would later say, cotton is king. Got it? In the Northeast, the draw will be something else. Okay, and we talk about the Northeast, it's first upstate New York, and later what we call the Northwest Territory. And what these farmers are going to do is they're going to grow grains like wheat and corn. Turns out that upstate New York and the Northwest Territory had better soil than what we used to have in the Northeast. Thus, once they were able to transport grain, and we're going to talk about that later, but once they're able to transport grain cheaply, they are going to be able to sell their grain from the West more cheaply than the people could grow it in the East. This made it so the people in the East are going to start changing what they do. They're going to stop farming grain so much. They're going to start moving to farming things like potatoes, and then eventually they're going to shift to manufacturing. Furthermore, these eastern or northeastern farmers are going to make a discovery, another technological change. European growing practices are going to start being practiced here in America. In the past, having land lie fallow, doing crop rotation, Americans didn't do it so much because they kept thinking there was so much land. But as more and more immigrants come to the United States, more of them bring their historical practices of crop rotation with them. You know what they discovered? That if you did practice crop rotation, you could double your yield. It was weird. You have 5 acres and you keep using it over and over and over again, okay? I have 5 acres, but I only use 4 of them. But I grow twice as much on my 4 acres than you do on your 5. Why? Because I allow the land to rest. I allow the land to rejuvenate. Got it? Well, as you grow more and more, what happens to the price? It starts to fall. And what this falling price does is it makes it so that you can now export your grain over to Europe. And the United States is now going to become part of a world grain market. And as we are starting to now get money from Europe, what's happening to our standard of living as we are now part of a world grain market? It starts to improve. Okay, so these things are going to bring about huge changes here in the United States. You've got these people who are now growing a cash crop, and they are also going to be able to sell to Europe. These people are growing grain. They are now part of a world market. The United States is now kind of on the map. The United States is now increasing its standard of living. The United States is, also doing what? As we grow more, as we plant more, what is the other effect here? To go back to what we just talked about a minute ago. If I'm continuing to expand onto more land to grow more, to make more money, what am I doing? Yeah. Yeah. we are further increasingly taking American Indian land. So what I want you to kind of think about this is that you've got two different ways of looking at it. Is the United States becoming a successful commercial nation? Yes. But what is one of the effects? What's happening, of course, to American Indians as we are being successful via growing on the land? We're pushing American Indians further and further westward. Pause here to see, let that sink in for a moment. So now, back to Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson was inaugurated president on the 4th of March, 1801. And when he does this, there's going to be this huge change in attitude that Thomas Jefferson brings with him to government. When John Adams and George Washington were inaugurated, we had huge pomp and circumstances. We had big carriages, big speeches, big everything. When Thomas Jefferson was inaugurated, he kind of had an aha moment. Kind of realized that if he truly believed some of the things that he believed, which was that government shouldn't be an aristocratic thing. A government shouldn't be something controlled by the wealthy. That he needed to demonstrate it in some way. Now remember, he is wealthy. Okay, he's a plantation owner. He was kind of a dandy. He loved fabulous things. He loved French food. He loved wine. This is him. But when he was inaugurated, he didn't want it to be about the fact that he was rich. So what he did on Inauguration Day was, rather than take a big carriage, rather than wear the finest of clothing, he walked to his inauguration. He put on a homespun coat and he walked. It was all symbolism. It was all about the fact that that the government was about the people. And by the way, other presidents, when they, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, when they were inaugurated, they both repeated this walk to try and make a connection with Jefferson. Even Barack Obama, after he was inaugurated, got out of his car and walked part of the way in the inaugural parade. And these were all homages back to Thomas Jefferson, trying to make a connection to the people. Okay, so this is a shift in government. Jefferson was thinking of it being republicanism, about the people, as opposed to the elites that the Federalists believed in. So, when Jefferson comes in, the Federalists have to leave. And even though we had our peaceful transfer of power, even though we had the Federalists control the presidency, the House, the Senate, even though they all left as far as control, they are going to leave what I kind of consider a parting gift. You see, they had lost control of the presidency, they had lost control of the Senate, they had lost control of the House. But there was one thing they had not lost control over. I don't know what they had not lost control over. What's that? Yeah. The judiciary. Judges. Every judge in America had been appointed by George Washington and John Adams. The Federalists controlled the judiciary branch. So what they did before they left is they took an advantage and tried to make it into a super advantage. One of their last acts, okay, before they left, was they passed what was known as the Judiciary Act of 1801. What this did is it created 16 new federal judges. This isn't the Supreme Court. This is just federal judges below that. And how long are these people appointed for? What's that? Life. So you already had everybody already in position for life. And now you're putting 16 more people for life. How long are they anticipating holding on to the judiciary branch? How long are they thinking about it? A long time. Now, these judges will be appointed by Adams. They'll be approved by Congress. And going all the way up until the very night before Thomas Jefferson takes office, John Adams is doing the last steps, writing out the commissions that you've been appointed, you have been approved by Congress, you are now a judge. Congratulations. You've been appointed, you've been approved, you are now a judge. Congratulations. He's putting on the finishing touches, writing out their commissions. Got it? And John Adams does this all the way until about 4 in the morning. And a lot of people call these people the midnight judges. John Adams then sneaks out of town at 4 in the morning so he doesn't have to watch Thomas Jefferson get sworn into office. Before he goes, however, he takes that stack of commissions and he puts them on the desk of the Secretary of State, whose job is to deliver them. But the problem is, the Secretary of State is already gone. His Secretary of State is already gone. And so who is he leaving the job to? Jefferson's Secretary of State, a guy by the name of James Madison. So now flash forward, you've got Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. They won the election. They're coming into the president's house. They're high-fiving their way down the corridors. Woo! We won! And then James Madison goes into his office and he finds a stack of commissions on his desk. What you gonna do? John, a little note on there. John Adams says, Jemmy, can you take care of this for me? Best, John. What's James Madison gonna do? Is he gonna deliver it? Not no. So he basically trashes these commissions. To make it even more interesting, the Congress is then going to repeal the Judiciary Act of 1801, saying that these new 16 judges did not exist. And so that's a question. They've been appointed and approved. How long are they appointed for? Life. So are these people judges or are they not? Okay? That's the question, right? One of these judges is a guy by the name of William Marbury. You imagine William Marbury sitting by his post office box going, I know I'm supposed to be a judge, I know I'm supposed to be a judge, and his commission never gets there. So finally he goes, man, I'm so mad. What do you do when you're in America when you're mad? What do you do? Well, what you do? You sue! That's right! You sue! I should be a judge! I know I should be a judge! I'm gonna sue you! Well, when the Congress first created the United States Supreme Court, they gave a power to the Supreme Court. And what this power was is that somebody could go to the United States Supreme Court and sue a federal official for not doing their job. Sounds perfect, right? The power in the Supreme Court is that you can go to the Supreme Court and sue somebody for not doing their job. Well, guess what? James Madison, did he do his job? No. So William Marbury is going to sue James Madison, Marbury versus Madison, in the United States Supreme Court. Marbury says, Madison, you didn't do your job. I'm suing you. Got it? So everybody thinks they have this figured out, right? You've got a Federalist court. You have a Federalist basically saying, I'm suing the Republican for not doing their job. The concept is pretty clear. These people were appointed. The only thing that hasn't happened is that Madison has not done his job. And so what everybody expected was that the court would basically side with Marbury and force James Madison to make them judges. Got it? Yeah.
What happened like 2 years?
This is how long things sometimes take. We're talking the court system, America, molasses. Okay? Anyway, the shocking thing is that John Marshall, who was the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, decides not to side with William Marbury. Instead, John Marshall and the United States Supreme Court will declare the Judiciary Act of 1789, at least the part that says that you have the right to sue in the Supreme Court a public official for not doing their job, unconstitutional. And why was it unconstitutional? The Supreme Court is supposed to be a court of appellate jurisdiction. You are supposed to appeal to the Supreme Court. It is not supposed to be a court of original jurisdiction. And thus, when the Congress gave this original power to the Supreme Court, they violated the Constitution. Got it? Yes? So what Marbury did is he sued James Madison directly at the Supreme Court because in the Judiciary Act of 1789 it said he could. Does that make sense? What John Marshall and the court rule, however, is that he did not, that the court did not have that power. And so in a weird way, what the court is saying, we don't have that power. So in a weird way, they're giving up power. But are they? Did the court really hurt its power by saying it did not have the power of original jurisdiction? What did they do instead? What did they do instead? It could be that they're appealing, but they're not, actually. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. What have they just done there? Does anyone see what they just did there? Because they did something huge. Yeah.
They still kept control and had power over it when they didn't do that.
They took ultimate power. They took the power to be the last word on all laws. Nobody had ever declared anything unconstitutional or constitutional before. And so what they just did is they set the precedent of judicial review. They basically now, when a law is passed, who in effect has the last word on whether or not it is a good law? The Supreme Court. Why? Because of this case. Nobody ever done it before. And so what they did, oh fine, you can't sue at the Supreme Court, whatever power. We are the last word on Obamacare, right? Obamacare exists or doesn't exist because of what we think. Which is more powerful? Which is more powerful? Which is more powerful? Being able to be able to watch over a lawsuit, or declare a federal law constitutional or not? Which is more powerful? The second one. Yeah.
Who would the 16 federal judges be? Like, under?
Yeah, they would have all been under the. So you've got the Supreme Court, and then you've got like circuit courts, courts of appeal, all these different levels of courts before you get to
Would
the Supreme Court.
Would have lost power if those federal judges were appointed?
They would not have lost power, but they just would not, at least at that point, have been the last word on all laws in America, because nobody had done it yet. It doesn't actually say in the Constitution that judicial review is the power of the United States Supreme Court. It is a precedent set by the court. This precedent set by the court that makes it so. Does that make sense? All right, so in effect, what all this is the supports trying to figure out what had happened. But what is the so what? This is the so what. This is the important thing. And so what I'd like you to do, this is John Marshall, he was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. We think of the Marshall Court as being this kind of precedent-setting court in America. What I want you to do right now is reflect and write why this precedent is so important. Why? Bella, why? Well done. I had snaps for that. Yeah. Okay, so Bella, can you repeat, and I will turn temporarily the fan down. So.
This precedent of judicial review ensured to the judiciary branch an ultimate power to declaring rulings of laws constitutional. This was the first time anyone had said such a precedent has lasted until today.
Fairly significant. And so, chose some synthesis, so we'll give you your synthesis. So now, Mr. Jefferson and the West. So our first topic was this, is this empire in the West. How does Jefferson play into this? Well, Jefferson will make one of the biggest land deals in world history. It's known as the Louisiana Purchase, and the way that this came about was that in 1800, Spain is going to secretly give back to France the Louisiana territory. Now, how does that happen? Well, you don't really need to know. What you need to know is that it involves a Napoleon. Okay, so you just kind of think of it that way. Well, it's a secret, but I'm not sure. People, a secret giving of a third of a continent from one country to another, how well do you think that secret can be maintained? This is, you know, it's kind of like Harry Potter fighting Professor Quirrell in the dungeons. It was supposed to be a complete secret, but naturally, everybody knew about it. And that is kind of what happens with this transition of land. We figure it out when we try to exercise what we are right to deposit on the Mississippi River. We had, according to our treaty with Spain, the ability to unload our raft ships in New Orleans without tax and put them on ocean-going vessels. That was the deal we had with Spain. Well, all of a sudden, we don't have that deal anymore. It's a violation of the treaty. Well, why is it a violation of the treaty? Well, because Spain doesn't control the port anymore. Now, Jefferson is immediately now going into panic mode. Because here he is, Jefferson, and if he's asked, you know, who do you love better, France or Britain? What is Jefferson's pat answer? What do you normally say? Who does he love more? He loves France. But with Napoleon, who has this habit of taking things that don't belong to him. Okay, Napoleon, right here on your border. Is this, you know, on a scale of 1 to scary? Where does that land? Pretty darn scary. And so Jefferson is panicking that he might have to protect himself by getting into an alliance with I bet you couldn't even say it. So he's got to do something to try and prevent this from happening. So he sends some envoys, including future President Monroe, to go meet with the French. His idea was simple. It doesn't matter as much if the French control all this territory if America controls New Orleans. If America controls New Orleans, then we don't have to worry about right of deposit because it's ours. It's our river, we're fine. So he sends Monroe and Livingston to go off to France. Okay, we're willing to pay $10 million. $10 million for New Orleans. No, if you go there, that's how they say it. Okay, New Orleans. Okay? New Orleans. New Orleans. Okay? Anyway. When future President Monroe gets to France, however, Napoleon goes all used car salesman on him. He says to these envoys, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Not only will I sell to you New Orleans, but I will throw in the entire rest of the Louisiana territory for just $5 million more. That is correct. You were going to offer me $10 million for New Orleans? Well, $15 million for all of it. Do we have ourselves a deal? Is this a fabulous? I mean, look at this. All of this territory for just $15 million. Do you want it? Come on, say that you do. Of course. A third of a continent for $15 million? What you saying, people? Not yes. Hell yeah. Got it? Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Okay? Unfortunately, I have answers. And so, why would Napoleon do this? So we basically kind of melted it down to three main reasons. First thing is he needs money. Remember, he is somebody who has a habit of trying to take things that don't belong to him. But in order to do this, you need an army. So he wants money for building up an army. So that's one. Now, interestingly enough, there's a little bit of irony here. In order to get this $15 million, we are going to have to borrow from British banks. So we borrow money from British banks to give to Napoleon so he can build an army to use against the British. Money makes the world go round. The second reason that France was interested in selling was that Napoleon was kind of having it up to here with the New World. You see, in the French-controlled colony of Haiti, there was a slave rebellion. And the French assumed that they could just send in the fabulous French army and crush the slave rebellion. They failed. The French army arrives, it's sick, they do not crush the rebellion, and so if you're Napoleon, you go, are you thinking you love the New World so much as your army dies? No, wouldn't you rather use your army to go conquer like parts of Europe? Maybe Russia someday? Yeah. And so basically he's kind of had it with the New World. The final thing is it in France's was it in France's interest to have the United States and Great Britain in an alliance? Now remember, it's not as if we're a military power, but what are we? What type of power are we? Now, power might even be overstating. What was the benefit? What was the United States? What did I just tell you that the United States is now becoming a benefit with? Food. We are a food supplier to the world. And so we got all the food. Is it good to make sure that your enemy has all the food? No. So he doesn't want the United States necessarily on the side of Great Britain. Now Jefferson, he does take the deal. But, we believe that this deal was a violation of Jefferson's principles. You see, Jefferson had once argued regarding the Bank of the United States. If the Bank of the United States isn't in the Constitution, you can't do it. Because Jefferson said that this is a rule book. Everything you can do is found therein. Remember, he was a strict constructionist. He believed that the Constitution was precious. But it says nothing about big land deals in the Constitution. It says nothing about purchasing an empire in the Constitution. Now, it doesn't say you can't do it, but who would say it doesn't forbid it? Who would be the one who would be more likely to argue, well, it doesn't forbid it, so you can? Hamilton would have. And so now all of a sudden, by saying, oh wait, it doesn't say you can't, what is Jefferson sounding like? Hamilton. Does Jefferson want to sound like Hamilton? No. But, to pass up this deal, what would he have to be? He's seriously an idiot if he had passed it up. So just imagine you're sitting there stuck between, I'd be an idiot if I don't do it, I violate my principles if I do it. Where do you want to land? Where do you want to land? And so Jefferson violates his principles. Now this makes for a very interesting question. Some people, Jefferson, he's fabulous, okay? You can write huge essays just about Jefferson. Because what is Jefferson? Is he a pragmatist or is he a hypocrite? Yeah, you could make a case, you could make several different cases here, can't you? Yeah.
Why would Spain even want to give France Louisiana?
Let's just say it involved a Napoleon. Does that work? Okay. All right. Or now, by the way, Jefferson talked, never happened, but he talked about trying to get an amendment to the Constitution to let this happen. But obviously, could you even do that? How long would it take to amend the Constitution? Would that happen instantly? And what happens to the deal while you're going through all of that process? It could go away. So he contemplated it, but in the end, he just went through with it. Final thing on this. Jefferson was violating his principles. Guess who also sounds a little bit hypocritical? The Federalists. You see, the Federalists start to do the math. As new states have been entering the Union, what types of states are they? Are they big commercial states with trade and banks, or are they farm states? Which way did farm states usually vote? Republican or Federalist? And so if you add all of the Louisiana Territory, what type of states are they probably going to be? Farmer, Republican. And so what basically, if you're looking at the handwriting on the wall, what does requiring the Louisiana Territory do to the Federalist Party? Kills it. And so guess what? They argued that you can't do this because it's not in the Constitution. Got it? They also go further. They start plotting a conspiracy. Okay? So the Federalists believe that if they add all of the Louisiana Territory, it means farm state, farm state, farm state, farm state, which means Republican, 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 which means that the Federalists are dead, dead, dead. Yes. Well, one response to losing in this way is to do the old, well, I don't want to play anymore. And a group of Federalists are going to start hatching a scheme. A scheme where New England would secede from the Union and form its own commercial Federalist country. Woohoo! The problem is that they didn't think that on its own, New England could make much of a country. But if you added New York, now that could be a country, because it's New York and everything. So, they contact Vice President Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr is not so much beloved by the Jefferson administration. Why is he not beloved by the Jefferson administration? Yeah, he ends up running against Jefferson and bad. That wasn't how it was supposed to happen. And so, they contact Burr, and even though he was a Republican, guess what he was even more than being a Republican? A scoundrel. A scoundrel who likes power. And so what they do is they say, okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to run for governor of New York. You're going to win. And then when you win, you're going to announce, we're going to secede from the Union and join with New England. And New York and New England would leave the Union and form a fabulous country. Maybe we'll even call it Burrland. Anyway, so Aaron Burr starts his little plot, right? Who gets wind of the plot, fellow New Yorker and devoted American, even if he is a Federalist, Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton learns of the plot, and he works any way he can, says anything anything that comes into his mind about Aaron Burr and his scoundrelness. The scoundrel. Do not vote for Aaron Burr. You don't want him as governor. He is a scoundrel. And he works to make sure that Aaron Burr loses as governor of New York. Well, in the midst of this anti-Burr campaign, Hamilton said a lot of very personal things about Aaron Burr. We are not sure about everything he said. But Aaron Burr had a great-grandson by the name of Gore Vidal. Have you ever heard of Gore Vidal, the novelist? And Gore Vidal wrote a novel called Burr. And in the novel Burr, okay, he argues that one of the things that Alexander Hamilton had said about Aaron Burr that helped him lose this election, and that was very personal, is that he started a rumor that Aaron Burr was sleeping with his stepdaughter, Theodosia. Everybody, ew. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Ew. Okay, so, Theodosia. Anyway, after Burr loses, he challenges Alexander Hamilton to a duel. Now, dueling is illegal in New York, so naturally, you go to Jersey for this type of thing. Okay? So, you know about Jersey, right? What happens in Jersey stays in Jersey, all right? You know? Anyway, so they row across the Hudson River to Weehawken, New Jersey. 4 guys on a boat. Burr and his backup, Hamilton and his backup, and a doctor. The whole ceremony, according to the Code El Dulo, is played out. Who gets to fire first, the paces, the whole 9 yards. And as it turns out, Alexander Hamilton is going to be given the first shot. And so they've done their paces, they're facing one another on the field of honor, and Alexander Hamilton takes his pistol and he fires it at a nearby tree. He then stands with his arms out facing Aaron Burr. And Aaron Burr takes careful aim and shoots Alexander Hamilton, thus becoming the first vice president of the United States to shoot someone. You know about the next one, right? Cheney? Anyway, Alexander, just some guy in a duck hunt or something like that. Anyway, Alexander Hamilton eventually dies from his wounds, but it happened in Jersey. But this is not the last we hear of Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr then travels to the West, and he gets involved in yet another secessionist plot, this time for the West to secede from the Union. We'll call it Burland II. This time, however, Burr is arrested for treason. But when he is put on trial, the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, who is Thomas Jefferson's cousin and despises his cousin, makes the bar for the bar for being found guilty so high that Burr is acquitted. Okay. That about does it for our scoundrel Aaron Burr. The argument has gone down in American history. Is he the first great American scoundrel? Some people call him the first great American badass. Okay, you know, shooting and killing Alexander Hamilton and all that. So this is a fabulous reenactment, portrait of the duel. Naturally, of course, they are not only 2 feet away. They had gotten there by boat. There wasn't any sort of dueling path, but otherwise, it's a pretty good drawing. No songs? The United States now has full control over the Mississippi River. And President Jefferson is now going to send a team to explore. He kind of imagined this even before he actually acquired Louisiana. Jefferson had theorized that North America could be something like Europe, with a big river that you could navigate and travel across the entire continent. He was hoping to find such a river. And so he trains his personal secretary, Meriwether Lewis, in all the arts of botany and zoology and stuff like that. And Lewis will contact an old Army buddy by the name of William Clark, and they will co-command what was known as the Corps of Discovery. This team will explore the Louisiana Territory. It will find the headwaters of the Missouri River. Will then keep going. It will go all the way to the coast, traveling part of the way on the Columbia River. Now, based on the LaSalle theory, you sail down a river to its mouth, you get to do what? Claim that territory for your country. And so, Lewis and Clark will claim what was known as the Oregon Territory for the United States. Now, when you think of the Oregon Territory, don't think small. Don't think just what is today Oregon. Think of Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, parts of the Yukon, Montana, parts of Colorado, parts of Nevada, okay? All of that territory is claimed by Lewis and Clark for the United States. Got it? The land deal. And this map does not even go high enough. It goes all the way, the Oregon Territory goes all the way up to the southern border of Alaska at 3630 north latitude. Yeah?
Why don't we have that part of British Columbia today?
Because it seemed like a good idea because the British thought it was all theirs. The Spanish thought it was all theirs, and Russia thought it was all theirs. So it was pretty good with all those people claiming it that we got one half. All right, so everybody take a breath right now. Okay, breathe in. Exhale. It's now 1804. Have you guys ever heard of the old saying, quit while you're ahead? Yeah. Had Jefferson thought of that in 1804, he would have been one of the most beloved presidents ever. But he doesn't. And in 1804, Jefferson demonstrates that he has killed pretty much the Federalist Party by winning 92% of the election. Okay, it's a big, hey look, see what I've done? No one's voting Federalist anymore. Even up in Federalist land, they're not voting Federalist. Up in Federalist land, many of those people realize that the only way they can truly be part of the federal government is by becoming Republicans. And so they start a faction of the Republican Party that will later be known as the National Republicans. Anyway, Jefferson is going to defeat Charles Pinckney for the presidency easily in 1804. He then begins a second term. But in his second term, France and Britain are now at war. Napoleon is now, yeah.
What do you mean by Jefferson defeats?
Pinckney. Pinckney was the one who was running for the Federalists.
Oh.
So Pinckney gets about 8% of the vote, which basically shows that the Federalist Party is pretty much no more. France, however, is now at war with Britain. And what this does for Thomas Jefferson is it puts him in the same position as George Washington. Two major European countries are at war. He tries to maintain the same neutrality that George Washington did. But the British are going to start impressing our sailors and seizing our ships again. Jefferson believes that he has to respond to these actions. He's got to do something. So he starts a policy that is kind of an economic warfare. That we're going to respond to your seizing of our ships, taking of sailors, by punishing you economically. So what we do is we pass what is known as the Non-Importation Act, and we're going to forbid the importation of certain British goods. This is kind of like you know what's happening in the Ukraine. The United States and Western Europe are unhappy with what Russia's doing, so we're putting economic sanctions on the Russians to try and punish them for what's happening in the Ukraine. This is kind of like what the United States was trying to do with Britain. Okay? Hey, we're not going to buy your stuff so much if you keep taking our sailors. Got it? But in 1807, the British are going to up it a notch. About 10 miles off our coast, after signaling an American ship and making a demand that they basically open up their ship to be boarded so that the British could impress some of their crew. The American commander, of course, says, "You're not getting on my ship." And the British fire on them. So 10 miles off our coast, they fire on an American ship. They then board it. They then impress part of the crew. What you gonna do? I mean, this is this isn't just some merchant ship thing. This is the USS Chesapeake, an American warship. I mean, imagine somebody boarding the USS Ronald Reagan and taking away some of the crew. What do you think the response of the United States would be? War. Something like that. The problem is we are too weak. John Adams, during the quasi-war with France, had ordered the creation of a larger American Navy. There were several USS Constitution-class ships that were in the works when Thomas Jefferson came into office. But when Thomas Jefferson came into office, he canceled all of the shipbuilding contracts. basically declaring that this was no longer necessary because we're not in this quasi-war. And that the quasi-war was all just puffery by the Federalists, all getting all upset when they shouldn't have been. But by canceling those contracts, the United States had a pitifully small navy of about 12 ships, compared to the British with somewhere around 1,200. Who's going to win that? Not us. So Jefferson is going to try and up the economic ante. And he's basically going to, in effect, pull or create, in effect, an economic atomic bomb. We were angry that countries were not respecting our neutral rights. The British were boarding our ships, seizing cargoes, seizing sailors. The French were also boarding ships and taking cargo as well. Our rights as a neutral nation, okay, were in jeopardy. Could we trade with whomever we wanted when European nations were at war? And Jefferson believed that we had to do something. So he calls for an embargo act where all exports, all exports, and just in case you're not understanding what I'm saying here, all exports are now forbidden. Now think about that. He's basically saying we are no longer a trading nation. Also think about it as far as, what did Jefferson believe? The Constitution, strict. Now it says in the Constitution you have the right to regulate commerce. Wouldn't it be a stretch to infer that regulation of commerce is ending commerce? So what has he done with his beloved principles again? It's violated. For him, it was a compromise. You could either submit, okay, Britain, board any ship you want, take our stuff, see any sailors you need. Go to war. We have 12 ships. We're going to lose. So you can't fight. You can't submit. What do? You get out of the game. The effect, however, is that it is going to devastate the American commercial economy. And think about it. Do you think everybody's just going to go, okay, I guess I'll just stop trading now because the government says so? But what is the government going to have to do to make it so we don't trade? Enforce. Now Jefferson had complained when George Washington had taken an army of 1,300 and marched it out west after the Whiskey Rebellion. He said, here we are, a nation arming itself against a rebellion that doesn't even really exist. He believed that it was an overreach of power for the United States government. What do you think he's going to have to do to enforce this act? Same thing. Thomas Jefferson becomes his own worst nightmare. Jefferson is absolutely beside himself with trying to figure out what to do in this situation. People are writing him letters every day saying, how could you do this? How could you do this to my family? And Jefferson attempted to answer every single letter he got personally. He took out newspaper ads saying, please don't write me for a little while so I can catch up and answer to you. Jefferson is also a migraine person. And what oftentimes triggers migraines? Stress. And so for the last couple months of his presidency, he's going to crawl into bed and put the covers over his head. And basically leave everything to James Madison to run the show. So it's now 1808. Do you think we're running for president again? Jefferson steps down, thus following Washington's precedent of only serving 2 terms. Now you're thinking he would have lost, he wouldn't have, because they had so killed the Federalist Party. But could he run? In 1808, James Madison, as Jefferson's chosen successor, will defeat the same Charles Pinckney, okay, and Vice President George Clinton. Okay? Yeah, George Clinton. He's not related to the other Clintons. First of all, William Clinton, his real name is even Clinton. He was born William Blythe, but he was adopted by Clinton, and they changed his name at a young age. So, they are not related. Just in case you were wondering. But Clinton is from New York. So that's your new president, James Madison. Okay. I think the only president that I'm actually taller than. Got to be one, right? So in closing today, as Jefferson left office, the Congress repeals the Embargo Act. It basically repeal it on the day he leaves office as kind of a blank you. Okay? But have they solved anything? No. So in 1809, they passed the sillily named Non-Intercourse Act of 1809, which changed the embargo to simply no trade with England and France, but you can trade with anyone else. The problem with this act is it's completely unenforceable, because once you take your boat out at sea, who can you go trade with? Whomever you want. So it didn't work. So in 1810, they passed what I consider to be one of the least well thought out American laws in American history, and that is saying something. This law is known as Mickens Bill Number 2. It's sponsored by, I thought I had 1 more minute. Let's start with this one over again next time. I thought I could get it. I had delusions of grandeur. That teacher. Trying to get that.
Environment.
I never said it's in the 90s, bro. Like by the time it's 2, it's gonna be in the 90s. Yeah, yesterday.
A little bit.
It'll be in the 90s. Like probably like 70%.
It is bad.
That's probably. They also